Hello, welcome to the Abscondo podcast. I'm really glad you're here because today we're going to talk about healing. When you think about healing, you probably think about some kind of physical problem with the body or some health problem. You might think about some kind of psychological healing or damage that's been done in the past and you're trying to get past it. I would say pretty much everyone has some area where they could use some healing, where we're not quite optimal, to say the least. And so what is healing? Is it something that happens when you go to the doctor or go to therapy? You're probably going to guess, if you've listened to my shows before, that I'm going to say no, that's not it. Healing is what happens when we undo ego. Is it possible to completely undo ego? Isn't ego necessary? Isn't that part of our evolutionary development? Don't we need some ego? No, we don't. That is what the ego is trying to tell you. There is nothing to be found in the ego that you want. I can tell you that without a doubt. Let's say you want to heal the body. You have some kind of health problem, some kind of pain in the body, or something else having to do with your physical health that you want to heal. How would you go about doing that? Taking medicine, taking a cocktail of pills prescribed by the doctor? No. Healing starts by unblocking. Your body can heal itself. You don't need anything external because your natural functioning, the natural functioning of the body is perfect health. The only reason we don't have perfect health is because we do terrible things to our bodies. We eat terrible food. We don't move around and exercise. We don't get enough rest. Most of all, we have too much stress. So let's start with the idea of stress. Okay, what is stress? Stress is when you believe every thought in your mind, every fearful, worried thought, everything about the past and future, everything you're holding on to, that gets fed into the body and turns into emotions. You know it's true. You know that there's been times when you've been worried about something. You're up at night worrying or panicking about something, and your heart rate accelerates. You feel this sort of tension. You tighten up. And what happens with stress is that all the energy in our bodies goes toward this fight or flight response, which, as I'm sure you've heard before, is this evolutionary thing where you needed that to escape wild animals and danger and so forth. But it was never intended to be a reaction to just a simple thought. What's happened is that our ego minds, we've been conditioned by the world to develop this massive, this problem called the ego. And if we take it seriously, what happens is continually our thoughts, our uncontrolled thoughts, unobserved thoughts, get fed into the body and converted into negative emotions. Stress, fear, and so forth. And once again, that means your energy is diverted away from the natural functioning of your body, the normal heartbeat, the normal breathing, the normal digestion, and the healing that's required to undo the damage we do to our bodies every day. So naturally, if you're living in this state of stress and fear, your health is going to degenerate. The way to heal would be to undo that problem. Again, so escaping the ego is the way that you heal the body. Now, you can do other things that also help. And I want to talk about escaping the ego, but first let's go through what would healing look like, right? So beyond that, of course, fasting is a fantastic way to heal the body. Just get out of the way of doing more damage through eating, processed foods, sugar, starches, low-quality, processed, modern food damages the body. So to undo that damage, I've started doing this intermittent fasting for the past 8 or 9 days, and it's unbelievable. I've already lost a bunch of weight, and I feel better than ever, more energy. I feel great. So what I do is I go 16 hours where I don't eat anything, and then 8 hours where I get all my calories. And for me, this works really well to skip breakfast, to have lunch, dinner, snacks until about 8:30, and then eat nothing until 12:30 the next day. You go into a state of fasting after about 10 to 12 hours. So in the morning, somewhere around 8 or 9 o'clock, I go deeply into a fasting state. which isn't painful. It's amazing to find out that you don't need to actually eat. You're not really that hungry. It's not a painful hunger. It's just kind of a comfortable hunger. And I can easily get all my work done and do my workouts even, and then have lunch at 12:30. Beyond that, I do a keto diet. So it's kind of a 1-2 punch. But, diet, if you're still feeding your body unhealthy thoughts and taking them seriously and getting emotional about things, holding on to non-forgiveness, for example, things like this, it's not really going to help all that much. It's not just about energy from food and health from food, because that's not the source of health. You are the source of health. Your body functioning exactly as it was designed to do. It's amazing that our bodies continue to tick for all these years, despite everything we're doing to ourselves. Of course, exercise is wonderful, but that's not really the full answer either. And rest. Of course, you need to rest. You need to get enough sleep and enough rest and do some meditations to let the body heal. And I know it's controversial, but I don't believe health is going to come from medical treatments. That's the last resort. That's when everything else has gone wrong and a person just doesn't know what else to do. It doesn't have any other ability to do anything. They go to the doctor, they take a bunch of pills. It doesn't really work. Health is what happens when you let the body function. So how do you do that? How do you stop your mind? So we're talking about the health in the body. We've heard body, mind, spirit, right? Let's go to the mind now. I said earlier that the mind is what feeds the body these terrible emotions, or what it's interaction between the mind and the body. You have a thought, it goes into the body as an emotion that comes into the heart. So to stop that from happening, to get into a place where you're centered, where your body functions in a normal, relaxed state, your shoulders are not tense, your heart rate is normal, your breathing is normal, you feel good, that requires some kind of observing of the mind, right? So as I said earlier, that ego voice is going to continue. You're going to have silly thoughts about I can't believe he said that, or what's going to happen if they don't like me, and I'm not going to succeed, and I'm not going to make enough money, and I don't know what I'm going to do to pay rent next month. These are thoughts that the ego is going to continue to generate, no matter what your level of spiritual development. But what happens when you do escape the ego, when you do tell yourself that truly I do not want this thing called ego, I want to identify with my spirit, with consciousness, with love. When you take that seriously and that becomes your master, your reason for being, your thought system, even while the ego voice in the head continues to tell you silly things, in a voice that sounds an awful lot like your own, quietly, you're not going to take every thought seriously. You're going to say, that's my ego. And you're not going to take it as truth. It's insane. We take that ego voice, the normal state of being in this world today, is to take this ego voice and consider it true. Even though we find out that as we listen to that voice and take it seriously, it always changes. It blows in the wind. Minutes later, hours later, you have a totally different thought. Suddenly now you're optimistic. Now you're hopeful. No, now you're depressed. Now you're giving up. No, now you're hopeful again. You get a new idea. It's an insane roller coaster that goes on in the head. And yet we somehow manage to take these thoughts seriously. That's insanity. Of course thoughts are important. Of course they serve some useful purpose. But to think that that's who you are, that voice in the head is your identity, that's who you are, to ignore your body, to ignore your spirit, to ignore the way you feel, to sacrifice everything for this voice, that's the cause of all these problems. That's why healing is required. That's what got us sick to begin with. That's what's wrong with this world. And that's what we're doing here. That's what I'm doing on this podcast. I also put out daily posts or teachings on the I Am by InfoBeing mobile app and at abscondo.com and on Instagram. And by the way, I also started another project, which is called Relationship Forward. It's a YouTube video project. It's at search for Abscondo Relationship Forward on YouTube. And I'm doing a bunch of shows answering specific questions, video shows. And I hope you get some value out of that. The podcast will continue as far as I intend for it to continue as a more in-depth conversation for those who really want to dive deep. That's more of a surface level conversation, just kind of addressing a point or a question. Regardless, we're talking about healing. We're talking about ego, because you can't separate healing from ego. And you can go to therapy and talk and try to understand why do I have these thoughts? Where do they come from? What in the past happened? It doesn't matter. What matters is how to stop paying attention, to stop taking those thoughts so seriously. Now, of course, this is not just me talking. I'm sure that you've heard some of this stuff before. This is ancient spiritual wisdom that started, or at least we know of it starting way back, thousands of years ago. Lao Tzu wrote the Tao Te Ching. You have the Bhagavad Gita written in India. You have the Bible and the spiritual teachings having to do with this undoing of ego, so that we can enter the kingdom of heaven. If you don't think that if you come from a Christian background, all this stuff about the devil, the Antichrist, that's the ego. What do we think that is? The end times, when the ego dominates the world, the Antichrist takes over the world, that's now. The second coming is an awakening, a massive collective awakening. It could also be called the consciousness revolution. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about entering the kingdom of heaven, which is an inner state of peace, joy, enjoyment, feeling good, love, perfect love. No more conflict, no more stress. Heaven. And in that state, do you think that there's any illness? Of course not. So that's it. But that's really, healing is as easy as that. It's about, the spirit doesn't need any healing, because spirit just needs to be unblocked. Spirit is your true identity. We come into this world as this invisible thing called life. What is life? Scientists can look at matter in the universe. They can observe all these phenomena. They can look at our bodies and everything else, but they can't explain what is that thing called life. It's an invisible force that comes in to inhabit our bodies, and that's consciousness. That's this invisible force that exists in the nothingness, in the space, in the empty space. Can't be touched or seen or observed or studied. But it's there because we know it's there, because we're alive. Everything we care about is from that realm. Love, feeling good, being happy, respect. These are things that you may say that it's observed behavior, but it's actually more of an invisible thing, a feeling. And that's what we want to get to, is to where we live there, to where we live in a state of always feeling good. There's none of this stress and fear. There's just perfect love. Everything that happens is totally accepted. Life flows effortlessly. We're safe, secure. There's no fear. And only love can cure this. If you want more spirit if you want to align with spirit instead of fear, it's as simple as opening your heart, opening your mind, letting that energy within to flow through. Of course, the problem is that people don't think it's possible to escape the ego, to destroy, to shatter that serpent, that terrible thing called the ego. The first obstacle is that they don't know what it is. People say you have a huge ego. But they don't mean it the way that I mean it. When I say ego, I'm talking about the false sense of self, the voice in the head, the mind, the unobserved mind, the mind that is in charge of everything, that is totally insane and totally confused, which every mind is, as long as it is left unchecked by spirit. So the mind is conditioned, the voice in the head is conditioned by the lessons of the world, the lessons we are taught since we're born, from our parents, from the media, from school, from teachers, from friends, from the government, from the systems of power, from corporations, from jobs. All these lessons are lessons of ego. And to learn in this world, as it's defined and commonly accepted, is to learn the values of ego. That's what we learn in school. We learn to think. We learn to trust our minds, to think, to develop our minds, but nothing else about us. So the trick is that, unfortunately, that ego, which is conditioned by the world, by the ways of the world, takes the shape and form of your own voice. And that is the ultimate joke that is being played on us. We then take that voice seriously as though it was our original. It's the me. This is me. How can I disidentify? How can I escape me? Well, the trick is to know that it's not you. It's the conditioned voice in the head that is that way because you were taught the language. The language you're speaking was conditioned. It didn't come from you. So nothing about those sounds come from your true being. You are the consciousness. You are the observer of that voice, the observer of the reality around you, the consciousness, the attention that gets focused wherever it may focus. So when you know that that's what you are, and you understand that the voice in the head, those thoughts are conditioned, they were taught to you by the world, then you can begin to undo the damage caused by this terrible system of teaching people that they are their minds, letting them suffer because it always leads to suffering. Nobody's ever found true and lasting happiness or salvation or anything that you actually want, even love, through adherence to the ego. We have to learn to not adhere to the ego, to ignore it, to not pay attention, because now, when you do that, now it's about you. Now you're free. You're free from the control of this world. The systems of control. Why do you think that schools exist? Why does all this money go into media and advertising? Because they're controlling you. And they don't care if you're healthy. They don't care if you're happy. They want you to serve a function because those systems believe that that's the best way, but it's wrong. Your best function is your natural state of existence. So it is possible to, what I say, escape the ego. And it doesn't mean that you never have those thoughts again. It means that when you have those thoughts, you say, aha, that's the ego. It doesn't get fed into your body as negative emotion. It doesn't keep you up at night. You say, oh, silly thought. I'm not going to think about that right now. And this is why any kind of spiritual practice has to be a daily, ongoing practice. You don't just read one good book. You don't listen to one podcast. You don't have one good conversation or go to one retreat and get saved forever. The way it works, as you say to yourself, I believe that I do not need, that I'm not my ego, that it is possible to undo all the negative effects of my ego to align with consciousness. That is to awaken, to say for the first time that I believe this is true. Because as soon as you say this, you're not saying it from the mind. The mind would never say this. The voice in the head, the ego, will never admit to this. Because as soon as it does, it is the beginning of the end for the ego. As soon as the ego admits that it's not necessary, that it's not really the true you, that's its death. The ego is like this being that lives inside us, and it wants to live like every creature. It wants to live. It wants to sort of prey on you and live within you and become you. And it's fearful of its own undoing, like any living creature would be. It'll keep trying to come back. It's never quite killed altogether, but there are times when it is, and what can happen is that you no longer pay any attention to it at all. So as soon as you say, yes, I want to undo my ego, I believe it's possible to totally escape my ego so that it no longer has any power over me in my life. I do not believe that the voice in the head is truth, because it's demonstrated its own insanity my whole life. Now you've just awakened. If you can truly say that from your heart, because you can't say it from your mind. And as soon as you do say it, you've awakened. But it's not that simple, because now tomorrow you've got to awaken again. You've got to continue to awaken. You've got to continue to remind yourself. And that's why I do these daily teachings That's why I personally read something for a few minutes every day at least. That's why I meditate, because you're training your mind. You're training yourself to become aware of your mind and your thoughts. So that's, there needs to be a daily spiritual practice to heal and to stay in this place of healing. And when you do, you live longer. You have this sort of aliveness to you, this sort of, you notice how people, when they get older, they get kind of, some people get grumpy and they start to just have all this negativity and this grumpy attitude and this terrible attitude, and they look terrible, and they age and they gain weight and they get ill and they limp. But if a person who's gone through this healing process, this removal of ego, which is the only true healing, starts to radiate, their eyes look beautiful. There's a natural smile, or even not a smile, just an ease about their face, and no pain, no suffering. This is total success in life. And that's what I'm interested in helping everyone find. So I have a question. Do you believe it's possible to totally escape ego? Do you believe ego is necessary or not? If you can answer honestly that you do not believe ego is necessary, that there's a different thought system, that you've been wrong all this time, that we've all been wrong all this time, you've just awakened. You can let go of all the guilt, all the shame, all the worries about the future, all the defining yourself and projecting an image. You no longer let the past define who you are. You no longer define yourself by anything about your life. You're in this present moment, and you're feeling kind of an awakening. You're feeling the energy start to flow. Your shoulders relax. Stay here long enough, and you start to get excited about things. Your intuition starts to take over. Now you think about love. What is perfect love? And it's only found within you. So you go within your heart and your inner body, and you feel that you love yourself. That you don't need love from some other person, some imperfect person, like we all are, having to behave perfectly to show you that you're loved, because you already have that love within you. That's where love comes from. And since you have it, and you don't need anybody else for it, now it's very easy to extend it to others, because you don't care if they give it back. You already have it. It's nice if they do give some love back, but you already have it within you anyway. So you don't feel scared to open up to people. You can be rejected 9 times out of 10, and it's okay. It doesn't matter. You can be honest and not care if someone else agrees. You can respond to everything that's happening with love. You can easily accept everything. You can stop letting your mind say, this is good, this is bad. This is a good day, this is a bad day. It just is. You start noticing what actually is happening. You're present. You make fewer mistakes. You solve problems more easily, more calmly. Slowly your life gets better. Conflict goes away. Your income goes up because people find it easier to work with you. You're healthier. More creative. You can't create anything in the state of panic. Creativity comes when you do what? Creativity comes when you undo the fear, the ambition, the projection of image, when you let your intuition speak, when you let your consciousness come into the world, your love. That's creativity. This is what you do want. And it's not a journey, it's just a decision. Do you want to escape the ego? Thank you for joining me on this longer than usual podcast. I just wanted to kind of let it flow. And I'd love to hear from you. I hope to maybe meet you on the I Am by InfoBeing mobile app. And as usual, I will leave you with one of my songs. It's called Strangled into Gray. See you next time.
You get so set on do what the teachers say, well, they've gone away. And all they've left you with is one big lie, intended to keep us sane.